President for Government Affairs at the League of Conservation Voters. I'm here today on behalf of LCV, Climate Power, the Climate Action Campaign, and people in every state and district in this country who are calling on Congress to make once-in-a-generation progress on climate action, environmental justice, and good-paying union jobs. It has never been more important or more urgent for Congress to act on the code red for humanity that is the climate crisis, and we are so pleased to be joined by an incredible bicameral lineup of speakers and congressional leaders. We applaud the Biden-Harris administration and Congress for enacting the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act into law this week, and yes, finally bringing Infrastructure Week to America. This new law will bring badly needed investments in clean and electric vehicle infrastructure, charging stations, in electric school buses. It will help to replace harmful lead service lines. It will help modernize the grid and so much more. This is real and meaningful progress. But to fully maximize the climate benefits of the infrastructure bill, it could not be more important that Congress finish the job, pass the Build Back Better Act, and send it to President Biden's desk. Congress can and must pass the Build Back Better Act to meet the climate test, to put our nation firmly on track to cut climate pollution in half by 2030, the goal that President Biden has set and that science and environmental and racial justice require. This could not be more important to saving consumers money on their energy bills and other monthly expenses, to investing in the frontline communities and communities of color that have suffered the most from toxic pollution, in creating and sustaining millions of good-paying union jobs in the clean energy economy. All of this will make such a huge difference in people's everyday lives. And that's why we are so pleased that the House plans to pass Build Back Better this week. We urge the Senate to swiftly follow suit to pass this bill and to get it to President Biden. That's right. The time for Congress to pass Build Back Better, to meet the climate test for climate, jobs, and justice, that moment is right now, and we are so grateful to the members of Congress who are here today, who are all in, fighting day in and day out to make that happen. We are so grateful to have this great group of speakers, including Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Chair of the House Democratic Caucus, Hakeem Jeffries, Senators Tina Smith and Ed Markey, Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici, Congressman Josh Gottheimer, Congressman Mike Levin, Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, and Congressman Joe Neguse. And now, I am so pleased. I'm so pleased to turn. The speaker is on her way, so I'm so delighted to turn it over to Senator Tina Smith, an incredible champion for clean energy, for justice, for climate action. Thank you, Senator Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much to Climate Power and to LCV and to Tiernan, and thank you to my congressional colleagues for your tireless work to move a positive, progressive climate agenda forward. Now, Minnesotans understand that climate change is real, that is caused by human activity, and we must take bold action to stop it. And we have seen this summer in Minnesota with a terrible drought that has affected most parts of my state, fires in Minnesota's boundary waters, and Gooseberry Falls, which flows into Lake Superior, which is slowed to a trickle. We know in Minnesota that this is our moment to take action, and we cannot waste this moment. It is a moral imperative, but it is also an economic imperative. It is a health imperative. It is a justice issue. Now, let me say, the bipartisan infrastructure package that President Biden signed into law on Monday is a big deal. It is going to make significant progress making roads and bridges and transit systems more available and safer and better at getting our products to market in Minnesota. And the bold investment in drinking water is going to make a big difference for the health of people all over this country. And the investment in electric vehicles and infrastructure for electric vehicles is a big deal for moving our economy towards a clean energy future. But this infrastructure bill needs its other half. It cannot lift all this weight all on its own. And that is why we must pass We must address this climate challenge head on, and we must pass the Build Back Better Act. This act is going to take the kind of strong action that we need to move us towards the commitments and the pledges that President Biden has made. It expands clean energy tax credits so that we can make the transition to a clean energy future. It provides us with a fast path towards increasing energy efficiency for homes and for public buildings. And it builds out the power transmission so that we can get affordable and reliable clean energy. The leaders in the House behind me can do this. They will do this. And then it is up to President Biden and the Senate to finish this job. There will be more work to do, more work ahead, but I have great confidence that we can take strong climate action to move our economy towards a clean energy future that is going to make us more competitive, that is going to put us on the forefront of a clean energy revolution, that will improve our health, and that will strengthen our economy. So thank you to my House colleagues for the work that you're doing. Let's go get it done.
Wow, thank you, Senator Smith. That was really inspiring. And thank you to the League of Conservation Voters. A shout out to my chapter, the Oregon League of Conservation Voters. I'm Suzanne Bonamici from Oregon. Thank you for being here today to recognize that we must pass the Build Back Better Act. I just returned from the COP26, the Conference of Parties in Glasgow with Speaker Pelosi and a delegation, and we are energized and we are ready to take action here in the U.S. House. And I want to emphasize, and I see some of the signs here, that addressing the climate crisis means jobs, lots of jobs, good jobs. And the Build Back Better Act recognizes this and makes bold investments in cutting emissions, but also in growing a workforce. So together with the infrastructure bill that President Biden signed just the other day, the Build Back Better Act will create more than 200 million jobs over each of the next 5 years. That's really significant and really meaningful. And our efforts to build and repair infrastructure and our transition to a clean energy economy, we need a skilled workforce. So it's critical that we have a path for people to get the jobs, the skills that they need to get these good jobs. And that's through workforce training programs, registered apprenticeships. Shout out, this is a National Apprenticeship Week. So I have been fighting for robust workforce funding in the Build Back Better Act to make this possible so we can actually carry through on all of these important investments that we're making. We secured about $20 billion in the current bill. We also have funding for the Climate Conservation Corps. We're going to get people back to work building a clean energy economy. The workforce funding in Build Back Better is also going to provide workers with support services like childcare, transportation, and tools that they need to complete their training. And importantly, we know how important environmental justice is, and we know that the climate crisis has disproportionately affected communities of color, our BIPOC communities, low-income communities. We're going to make these opportunities available to those who have historically faced barriers to employment, particularly women and people of color. And I've spoken with people in apprenticeship programs. They tell me these programs change their life and their family's future. And just imagine what it's going to look like with all of these clean energy jobs across Oregon and across the country. And at this crucial moment, this code red for humanity moment, we have a remarkable opportunity to take bold action that will address the climate crisis and improve the lives of workers and families in Oregon and across the state. So we are energized, we are ready, we're going to get this done. I'm urging my colleagues in the House and the Senate to pass Build Back Better as soon as possible this week and then over to the Senate. I thank Speaker Pelosi for her continued commitment to get this done and over the finish line. We have science, public opinion, and momentum on our side.
Yes, we do, Congresswoman Bonamici. Thank you so much. And now I know we are all absolutely thrilled to hear from someone who needs no introduction, the most pro-environment, pro-climate Speaker of the House we have ever had by far, Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Thank you so much, Speaker Pelosi.
Thank you, Tiernan, and thank you, League of Conservation Voters, for getting us to the place we are now. You've heard me say again and again, we all have our goals, our vision, our plans, our knowledge. And we can only do so much with our inside mobilization, maneuvering. The outside mobilization makes all the difference in the world. So thank you, League of Conservation Voters and other groups who have been part of mobilizing opinion and organizing people across the country to save our planet. I'm honored to be here with our distinguished chair of the House Democratic Caucus, Mr. Jeffries, to be here with Mr. Horsford of Nevada, a leader on this issue, but also with three members that I was honored to be with in Glasgow. Suzanne Bonamici, as you just heard, Mike Levin, whom I don't know if you've heard from him yet, but you will, and Veronica Escobar. When we were there, people were very glad that America was back, as President Biden said. They were pleased that the other bill had passed the House, but they're very, very eager about this bill, which makes it happen for us in terms of preserving the planet, and doing so by lowering costs for families, by reducing pollution by 50% by 2030, by creating good-paying union jobs, and to do so with equity, with fairness, to build back better, Over about $500 billion in this legislation to protect the planet. It's a health issue, clean air, clean water for our children. It's a jobs issue, making America preeminent in good-paying green jobs. It's also a national security issue because competition for habitat and resources resulting from drought, and you know all of the challenge of natural disasters springing from the climate crisis. And it is a moral issue, if you believe, as I do, that this is God's creation and we have a moral obligation to be good stewards. But even if you don't share that view religiously, we all share it morally, that we have a responsibility to future generations. So again, thank you, League of Conservation Voters, all of the organizations who are making the strength of this, the mobilization of the American people. And you know, it's fabulous, it's great, it's big, but it's a good start. We have more to do. So I look forward to working with all of you, inside maneuvering, outside mobilization, and we're ready, again, to honor our responsibilities to future generations. Thank you, League of Conservation Voters. Now I'm pleased to yield to Tiernan, to our distinguished chair of the caucus, Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you. It's impossible to follow Speaker Nancy Pelosi, but it's an honor and a privilege to stand with our amazing speaker, as well as these distinguished members of the House Democratic Caucus, as well as the League of Conservation Voters and all of the climate activists and champions who are here at this very important, urgent moment for our country, for our planet, for our environment. The Build Back Better Act will invest in a green economy. It will invest in a sustainable economy. It will invest in a resilient economy. It will address decisively the climate crisis that we face with the fierce urgency of now, and in the biggest, boldest, broadest way in American history, because we know there is no planet B. And unless we address this crisis, as the scientists have indicated, and unless we cut global pollution by at least 50% at or in advance of 2030, the consequences will be catastrophic. Extreme weather events just this year alone have cost this country in excess of $100 billion. And things are not going to get any better on their own. And so investing in dealing with the climate crisis means investing in the creation of millions of good-paying jobs. It means investing in dealing with the crisis in a decisive manner that meets the moment. It means lowering energy costs for everyday Americans. And it means meeting the promises that President Biden had indicated he would undertake to deal with the climate crisis that we confront. And so this is something that is going to happen. It's going to happen in a big and bold and historic way, and the planet is going to be much better off as a result of it. We're going to get climate action done. We're going to get the Build Back Better Act done. We're going to do it together. Thank you for your partnership.
Yes, we are, Chair Jeffries. Thank you for your incredible leadership. And now I am thrilled. People may have noticed we have a surprised speaker. I think this really speaks volumes to the determination to pass Build Back Better, to meet the moment on climate, jobs, and justice. To have Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer here together is such an honor and clearly demonstrates what a priority this is for Democrats to get it done. Majority Leader Schumer, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiernan, and thank you and the great job that LCV and Climate Power does on this, the fundamental issue of our time. First, I want to celebrate the great achievement we made earlier this week with the bipartisan infrastructure bill becoming law. In the days, weeks, and months ahead, the American people will see the benefit of this bill in their daily lives. I also want to acknowledge Tina Smith was here from the Senate and all the great, diverse, in many different ways, House members who are here as well. And a shout out again to LCV and Climate Power who are here today. Now, we all know climate change is going to get worse and worse and worse. I tell my constituents, last year with COVID was awful. But in a few years, because of climate change, each year will be worse than COVID, and each year will be worse than the next if we don't do anything about it. The effect of climate change is just going to be horrible. But don't despair, America. Don't despair, world. Our Build Back Better tackles climate in a bold, ambitious way by making targeted investments in American industries, infrastructure, agriculture, to create millions of jobs with good wages while restoring our manufacturing competitiveness. Targeted investments in key parts of the American economy is going to spur a green industrial revolution while lowering the cost of energy for everyday Americans and ensuring that all of us have the cleanest, most efficient technologies available to our homes, our vehicles, our workplace. While no one provision is enough to address the climate crisis, the investments in clean energy and transportation will put us on a path to delivering on the president's ambitious goal. Reduction of greenhouse gases by 50% by 2030. That's an extremely ambitious goal, and we are going to do everything we can to meet it. That's why President Biden and I are working day and night to make sure this bill gets done. But addressing our emissions reduction is not sufficient. We need to ensure that at least 40% of the benefits are flowing to disadvantaged communities and that people living in communities dependent on fossil fuels are given the support they need so no one's left behind during the transition. The crisis is real. Our package is too important. There is universal consensus that we have to come to an agreement, and we're working nonstop to get that done. In fact, I got to go do it right now. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you so much, Leader Schumer, for your powerful words, for getting it done. And now we're really excited to hear from some rising stars, some real climate champions in the House. First, we'll hear from Congresswoman Veronica Escobar. Then we'll hear from Congressman Mike Levin, then Congressman Joe Neguse, and then Congressman Horsford. We may have a couple of other speakers along the way. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Congresswoman Escobar.
Thank you. Good morning. Buenos dias. Good to see everyone. I'm going to say just a couple words in Spanish because I know we have our Spanish language stations. Buenos dias. Estamos aquí para tomar el primer paso para preservar nuestro planeta. El trabajo que necesitamos hacer es tan importante y esta semana vamos a empezar lo que tenemos que hacer para el futuro, para nuestros niños y para futuras generaciones. You know, I had the incredible privilege of being with the speaker and with some of my colleagues at COP26, where the president and global leaders came together to make promises and commitments that will help us stave off the worst of the climate catastrophe that has been unfolding across the globe. We have to keep those promises and those commitments, and Build Back Better is a vehicle for us to ensure that we do that. As was mentioned, we celebrated this week the signing of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, which is a step in the right direction on climate, but it is not enough, not nearly enough. Build Back Better is going to help us achieve many of the goals that we need to achieve in order to ensure that we have a sustainable future. And I will tell you, the choice could not be more clear. The choice is either between urgent action or anything less than that is the equivalent of inaction. Inaction, we have already seen and witnessed where we're headed with it. I represent El Paso, Texas, a community in the Southwest that is warming faster than most other communities, where we are seeing increasing triple-digit temperatures, longer, hotter summers in a community that has long been economically disadvantaged. That is killing people. I also represent El Paso as a border community. And for those who've been covering the movement of migrants across our hemisphere, there is no doubt that much of that migration is coming from the climate crisis. And what we are seeing is increased poverty and famine in our hemisphere. And unless we do something, we should expect all of those images and all of that humanitarian need only continue to be exacerbated. So that is our choice. We can either take action this week on what is an important key component in keeping our COP26 commitments, in building a new economy, in ensuring that there's equity and the vulnerable are protected, and more importantly, that we are able to have a planet where we and future generations can live. So the choice for me is clear. I cannot wait to walk up those steps and vote for Build Back Better and begin the hard work that it will take to preserve our beautiful environment and make sure that this sweet note from Mom's Clean Air Force, from a child who is asking us to protect them, to make sure that we keep our promise for those kids. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Mike Levin, the gentleman from California.
Well, thank you so much, Veronica. Good morning, everybody. If you visit my office here in the Longworth building, you'll see a picture that my 9-year-old son drew. It's a picture of the Earth, and it says, "Love the Earth." And when I go into the office every morning, I think of him. I think of my 7-year-old daughter and the planet that they're going to inherit. And for me, as a parent of young children, thinking about the future, there really is no other option for us but to make the kind of investments that we must, commensurate with what science demands, to actually address the climate crisis before it's too late. I want to thank LCV, Tiernan, and everybody. They have been absolutely tremendous, and we are in this fight with them for as long as it takes, because failure is not an option. There's simply too much riding on our success in the coming days and weeks. I was so proud to be part of the delegation that went to Glasgow to meet with the international community to remind them that America is all in, and that we are going to do our part to meet our nationally determined contributions to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and to help lead the world again as we meet the goals of Paris and beyond. The takeaway for all of us, I think, in Glasgow was very clear. We've got to rapidly and drastically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to limit global temperature increases. And it requires bold action across the board in the way we move goods, the way we move people, the way we build buildings, the way we grow food, and the way we generate electricity, to do all of the above. And after 4 long years of climate science denial from the previous administration, the U.S. is on the verge this week of making the largest single investment to combat climate change in our nation's history. Paired with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and we're still all smiling from that signing ceremony at the White House this week, this is our best chance to take the kind of action that will finally meet the scale of the crisis that we're facing. Since my colleagues have already spoken about some of the portions of the bill, I wanted to just briefly dispel a myth that climate action can only come at the expense of our economy. It's never been true, it never will be true, and my state of California is proof of that. California has led the way in transitioning from fossil fuels toward renewable energy, changing the way that we move people and goods and protecting our air and water. And since we made those investments, our economy has grown significantly as a result. In fact, our gross domestic product increased 21% over the last 5 years. The next two states, New York and Texas, aren't even close. Sorry, Veronica. Sorry to Hakeem, although he left. California is now home to 36% of the U.S. renewable energy industry, and those companies have increased their labor force by 35% since 2019. So investing in climate action is also an investment in our economy, in jobs, and in American competitiveness on the global stage. That's always been true, and it's one more reason why we must pass the Build Back Better Act with all of the climate policies it currently includes. And anyone who tries to argue that climate action will impede economic growth simply isn't following the reality of what we've done in places like California. So I went to COP26 thinking about our planet, thinking about our children, and thinking about the experience of California. When we make bold investments in climate action, we're not just protecting our planet, we're lifting up millions of working families with the jobs of the future. So we must pass the Build Back Better Act and its historic investments in climate action. Anything less would be a moral failure for our children and our grandchildren. And with that, I want to introduce my dear friend, a rising star in the House Democratic Caucus, the dynamic, passionate leader from the state of Colorado, Joe Neguse.
What a kind introduction from my good friend, the gentleman from California, whose expertise on clean energy has been such an incredible contribution to the House Democratic Caucus and really the Congress here in Washington, D.C. And to see the way in which he was received at COP26 on the delegation that Speaker Pelosi led was nothing short of outstanding. So very, very grateful for his leadership and the leadership of all my colleagues who joined me today. I represent a northern district in Colorado, northwest Colorado, Central Mountains, the best skiing in the world. You all are welcome to come anytime. But I also happen to represent a community that has been besieged by wildfires. Last year, we had the first and second largest wildfires in the history of Colorado both converge simultaneously in my congressional district. Homes were lost, businesses destroyed, and tragically, 2 constituents lost their lives. Right now, today, as we speak, in Estes Park, a community in my district, there is a wildfire raging, not that far from a massive population center. In November, those of you who have visited Colorado know that this time of year, we're usually skiing and snowboarding. But climate change has completely altered the calculus for the Rocky Mountain West. And the reality is these wildfires will be here to stay. These are the stakes. This is why we are pursuing the bold climate action that we are poised to enact in just a few short days here in Washington, D.C. The stakes really could not be higher. The amount of money that we will invest in wildfire resiliency, in mitigation, in reforestation by virtue of the Build Back Better bill is nothing short of transformative. And it is life or death for my constituency. I couldn't have said it better than my friend Mr. Levin from California, but I think of climate change through the prism of being a young father. My wife and I have a 3-year-old daughter. She just started preschool this year, which is very exciting. And we think a lot about the world that she will inherit. And I'm reminded every day when I look into her eyes that we only have one planet and that it's up to us to save it. When I joined Mike and Speaker Pelosi and many of my other colleagues in Scotland last week for the COP26, I was so taken aback by the reaction that our delegation received from the international community. It is clear that the United States has a leadership role to play and that the international community is counting on us to get it done. They are very grateful for all that President Biden has done already during his short time in office by virtue of the executive actions he has taken and, of course, the incredible investments that we've made in climate, a down payment, if you will, through the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was signed into law just a few days ago. But they are counting on us to finish the job, to finish what we started. And the only way we can do that is by making sure that Build Back Better is enacted into law. And you have broad consensus in the House Democratic Caucus, our colleagues in the Senate, and I think across the American public to do precisely that. So I'm excited about the momentum that is building. I can't wait to vote yes on this bill tomorrow or perhaps the next day, but either way this week. And I know that when we do that, we will be one step closer to finally addressing this existential crisis that we face, not just as a society, but really as a planet. With that, I want to now turn over the mic to my good friend and distinguished colleague, the Vice Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, someone like me who has immense amounts of public lands in his district and who has been a leader on clean energy investments through his perch on the Distinguished Ways and Means Committee, and that is my good friend, Stephen Horsford.
Well, good morning. It's great to be here with the League of Conservation Voters, with the Speaker, our House Caucus Chair, the Leader of the Senate, and my colleagues from the House and the Senate. I'm Stephen Horsford, representing Nevada's 4th District, and as my colleague Representative Nagu said, my district covers 52,000 square miles. It's half the state of Nevada geographically, from Las Vegas and North Las Vegas, including 6 rural counties. And a lot of the renewable energy in solar and geothermal that other states are benefiting from get generated in Nevada. And I am proud to be a leader on the Green Act, which is included in the Build Back Better plan to provide the types of incentives for energy production and for transmission infrastructure that we need to get the renewable energy to the end users. I also want to just highlight, as my colleagues have, Las Vegas is experiencing some of the hottest temperatures ever on record. And as a result, we are experiencing the worst drought. And the federal government declared a national emergency. We had Vice President Kamala Harris to our district to show her the effects of the drought. And with the investments from the Infrastructure and Jobs Investment Act and the investments from Build Back Better, we are not only mitigating and investing in jobs for clean energy, but we're also addressing issues like the drought, like wildfires, while creating great jobs, reducing energy costs, and addressing environmental injustice, which has plagued our society for generations. So this is the time to act. I'm proud to be a part of this broad coalition within the House to deliver on the Build Back Better Act this week, the vote that is necessary to push this action forward. And it's because of the leadership of the League of Conservation Voters and other organizations that we are at this point. So thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for pushing this Congress to act and to be held accountable to the decisions that we make, not just for this generation, but for future generations. I'd like to turn it over now to my colleague, who is the co-chair of the of the Problem Solvers Caucus.
Close, man, close.
Very close. But see how we come together? He is a leader in so many ways and has helped to tackle a number of key issues, including on the climate action, Congressman Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey.
I don't know, you have me in there, Joe? I don't know, man. First, I want to thank my colleagues. Thanks for that great introduction, Stephen, for your unbelievable leadership, not just here, but back home. You do just such a phenomenal job. And all I do is hear great things about you and what you do. So thank you so much. I do want to thank the League of Conservation Voters for just being such a consistent and powerful voice all across the country and fighting day in and day out to make sure we're where we are today. So I want to thank you so much. We're here to recognize the concrete steps that we're taking to protect our air and our water and our open spaces for our children, our grandchildren, pragmatic, common sense action in our fight for the future of our communities and our planet. You know, when you talk about fighting climate change, at first it seems like an insurmountable task. But then you dig into it and you quickly realize that we can take immediate steps right now that will have both a short-term and a long-term impact on our lives, on our health, on our economy, and our planet. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, which was passed earlier this week, has historic investments in bolstering climate resiliency to deal with the once-in-a-century flooding, fires, storms that have cost New Jersey more than $50 billion in the last 10 years alone. And if you look at Hurricane Ida and what it did to my state just recently, flooding homes and businesses and schools, washing away roads, and sadly taking many lives, you realize just how important it is that we act and that we not delay. These costs will only get worse if we fail to act. In 2020 alone, U.S. taxpayers saw more than $100 billion in costs from climate-related disasters, and over the past 5 years, these costs have totaled more than $600 billion. Not to mention the wildfires that have burned over 6.5 million acres this year so far. It will cost nearly $90 billion. This all has a real impact on our economy and on lives. The cost of inaction is simply far too high. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, which Democrats and Republicans came together to pass, will also help get the lead out of our children's drinking water and build electric vehicle infrastructure we need for the next generation of vehicles. Now, of course, we have another opportunity to take immediate action on the steps we so desperately need. With the Build Back Better Act, we have the opportunity to deliver another critical part of the puzzle in our fight against climate change. This historic bill will include key incentives for our families to move over to electric vehicles, wind and solar power, and for utilities to upgrade their power grids and transition to clean energy sources. It will also invest more in replacing lead service lines and keeping all of our communities safe. And it will create jobs, and more jobs. It will do all this while cutting taxes for hardworking New Jersey families in this legislation by restoring the state and local tax deduction or SALT. You know, passing the infrastructure bill with Democrats and Republicans showed the world that climate change is a bipartisan issue. It's not a partisan issue. It's one where we all can come together around, because for the good of our country, for the good of our planet, we need to work together to get this done. And when the CBO analysis comes back, which I expect and hope will match with what the White House and Treasury's estimates, we'll be able to move forward without delay. Fighting for clean air and clean water and a planet that our children and grandchildren can live on is something that has been a focus of mine before I ran for Congress. And now we're finally here. This week we took incredible action. It's because of the help of our friends, because of the people behind me, and all they did to make sure that this was front of mind every single day. For New Jersey, for our planet, we must take action. We must tackle climate change and make sure we take the steps to protect our children and our grandchildren here in the greatest country in the entire world. I know our best days will always be ahead of us. Thanks and God bless.
Thank you so much, Congressman Gottheimer, for your leadership for environmental health, for climate action, and so much more. Thank you to Congressman Levin, to Congressman Neguse, to Congressman Horsford. And now I can think of no better way to close us out today than to hear from longtime climate champion. No one has fought harder throughout his career for climate, jobs, and justice than Senator Ed Markey. Thank you so much, Senator Markey.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for being here. So I just returned from Glasgow. It's obvious that the rest of the world wants the United States to be in the lead. Because if we don't lead, then we will not have the Chinese or the Indians or others who will, in fact, step up and do what is necessary to avoid this catastrophic threat to our planet. We can see very clearly what is happening around the world. Billions in damage from wildfires, massive hurricanes, deadly flooding, catastrophic freezes, other climate-fueled emergencies here in the United States and around the rest of this planet. And we can see the human toll, the lives lost, the homes destroyed, the businesses with shuttered doors, the families displaced, babies that have drowned in New Jersey, grandparents frozen to death in Texas. Climate action is a matter of life and death. So we've now finished the infrastructure bill. But if we do not complete this Build Back Better vision of Joe Biden, then we will not have done the job on climate change. We will not have unleashed all of the economic potential to create millions of jobs in our country, in wind and solar and plug-in hybrids and all-electric vehicles, and battery storage technologies, and transmission innovation in our country. We will not have accomplished that goal. The vision of millions of new jobs in our economy will not have been realized. So that's where we are right now. We're at that turning point. Will we finish this historic job? So it's imperative that the House of Representatives pass this Build Back Better package, because the Senate needs to receive that package and to then pass it before Christmas. I am dreaming of a green Christmas. I am dreaming of the American people and the rest of the world knowing that the United States has stepped up. What are we confronted with right now? We can see dramatically rising oil prices all across this country. We should be releasing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to send a message to the oil industry. We should repeal the law which now allows for the exportation of American oil. In 2015, the oil industry received that as their Christmas present, but we, as the American people and the planet, did not receive the kinds of additional provisions that we needed in order to save the planet. So that must be repealed. Right now, oil companies are taking American consumers and shaking them upside down at gas pumps all across our country, while simultaneously sending a signal to the Republican Party to kill Build Back Better, to kill a transition to all-electric vehicles, to plug-in hybrids, to battery storage technologies that will lead inexorably, inevitably, to the demise of those companies controlling the agenda of our nation. If we're afraid of Russia's agenda right now, Saudi Arabia's control over our foreign policy in the Middle East, there's one sure and certain thing that we can do, and it's over the next month, and that is to make sure that we have both of those countries and others like them on a pathway to bankruptcy, because the oil era will be over if we pass this bill. We will be able to say to each and every one of those countries that business as usual has ended. So for the babies and the grandparents who died in our country in just the last couple of months, for our national security, for our economic well-being, it is imperative that we pass this legislation before Christmas, because then the United States will be the leader. Then the rest of the world will not think that we're hypocrites, but they're actually stepping up and doing the work which they need. I'm dreaming of a green Christmas for our country and for the planet.
Thank you so much, Senator Markey. Thank you again to all of our incredible champions. Thank you to the hardworking organizers, volunteers, advocates across this country who are working so hard to finish the job, to build back better. Let's get it done. Thank you all.
Beautiful. Good job. Great. You're great. You're great.
Let me know how I can help. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
All right.
Let's get it done.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody. Thank you. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you for what you're doing. We have a little note for you.
Oh, thank you. Good. Thank you. You guys are the best. Thank you. Thank you all. See ya. Thanks.
Worked out very well. I'm so warm now. I still got so hot.